quickly show myself. Mark Rousseau. We're here to talk about a rack safety program and a step-by-step guide. I think we have some great information to share with everybody today. So here we go. I am Mark Rousseau. As I mentioned before, I head up the national accounts team here at Damotech. I've been with the company just shy of 9 years, focusing on our sales and the development of our national accounts. So what will we cover today? What will we learn about? First and foremost, the impact of a warehouse safety on operational efficiency. That's a big part of, I think, what we do. I think safety doesn't operate in a vacuum, and we have to be mindful of the operational impact that whatever we do has on the rest of the organization. We'll talk about how to implement a comprehensive rack safety program, which is really why we're here. How to apply a rack safety blueprint that we've developed, tangible benefits that you can expect as well. And of course, we'll have some takeaways towards the latter part of the presentation, so you can have some downloads and some other materials to help you navigate through your rack safety journey. So this is who we are. We were established in the late 80s. We're North America's largest rack safety partner. As you'll see throughout the presentation, we have a very, very diverse portfolio of offerings, which is why we can demonstrate an expertise in rack safety. So from the specialized engineering that we perform to the customers that trust us with their rack safety needs, we're able to answer the call when needed, whether it's for repair, protection of your racking, or to perform a study on the racking itself, inspection, load capacity, even training, which I think we'll touch on throughout the presentation. So why rack safety? Why are we taking time out of our busy schedules to cover this topic today? OSHA started a national emphasis program last summer. Hopefully, many of you have already seen it or been briefed on it. We have a blog on our website that speaks to the NEP. Fundamentally, they ran an analysis last year and determined that the warehousing and storage industry has roughly 2 times more non-fatal occupational injuries and illnesses than the rest of the industry. So that kind of made them wonder if there's a problem out there that they need to tackle. And I think we all know that the growth of distribution, the online purchasing and big box stores has caused there to be a significant increase in the footprint of warehousing across North America. And with that comes some safety concerns, which they've highlighted. I would certainly recommend everyone to go look at our blog to learn more about what OSHA's NEP is going to do to our industry. So as we dive into today's topic, I think we want to step back and understand racking just from a very, very, very fundamental level. Racks are highly efficient structures that require their components to be damage-free. The only thing that engineers look to do and OEMs for racking look to do is to make something that could hold a certain load under various conditions as cheaply as possible, right? So that's why you'll see various designs that perform extremely well, but they have to perform without being damaged. Once we introduce damage, whether it's bent brace, whether it's an impact to the front or back column, or even to a beam, we're now introducing a variable that was not considered necessarily as that racking was designed. So here we have some examples of damage that I'm sure folks can attest to. So starting from, you're an end of an aisle, someone makes a tight turn and clips the upright, or sometimes we're stacking materials at the back end of an aisle, which causes damage to the upright, which now we have to contend with. Same thing for the middle here. We're not even making contact with the slab anymore. So that upright is supported only by the back leg and the other uprights surrounding it. That's the only reason why this thing hasn't toppled yet, because as you can see in the image, it's still being loaded. And then to the far right, we have a structural upright in a drive-in situation with the pallet barely hanging off the rail due to the deformation on that front column. So with the top pallet, as you can see, almost ready to fall. So this is a catastrophe in waiting and things that we want to be mindful of, because if we don't take action, if we don't do the things that we're going to be talking about today, these are the unfortunate remnants of what could happen. So we never like to scare folks into doing the right thing, but I think images like these, I think, drive home the idea that if damage to an upright, if left unattended, certainly the tragic consequence could be a collapse and, of course, fatalities. I talked about a blueprint earlier at the onset of the presentation. We developed a rack safety flywheel, something that I think will hopefully hit home with many of you as you look to develop your own rack safety program. So as you think of a flywheel, before I go into it, think of something that you're pushing in a certain direction, and as you put pressure and force and gain momentum on that wheel, that initial push may require a lot of strength and a lot of effort, but over time, very little effort is needed to continue the momentum of the wheel. So that's how we came about this. So we're going to start off with the middle. The core of the flywheel is the what. What are we trying to solve for? What are we trying to improve? And it's rack safety. Now, why? Now, the why is important because we're trying to impart this to others. Leadership gets it, right? Leadership understands the importance of safety, even though there's a cost to it. For the most part, they get it. But we want to ensure that that thought process makes its way throughout the organization. So we start off with the why at the top being kind of employee well-being. Every organization has a duty to ensure that its people are well taken care of, and that means that they have to work in a safe environment. So if they're surrounded by racking that has been damaged, that it's fraught with issues, not so safe of an environment. Then we have a compliance element. So many organizations today, Fortune 500s and others alike, will typically have some form of health and safety function at their facilities within their organization, and will mandate that certain things be done from a rack safety standpoint. So if you're not just doing this for the benefit of your employee well-being, there's a compliance element here that takes that into account. And finally, and which is what I spoke about earlier, there's an operational efficiency. We can't be so ignorant of the fact that things cost money. We want to ensure that as there's damage to a particular upright, that if it's unloaded and we put it out of service, that eventually will have an impact on the operations of the facility. And who do we want to have involved in this process? So I'm a huge proponent of empowering folks to do the right thing and teaching them and educating them to do the right thing. And we'll have something on the back end of the presentation that speaks to this. But we want to ensure in-house knowledge. We want to ensure that the people that are operating within the warehouse, whether it's forklift operators, whether it's maintenance techs, operational folks, that they are mindful of the things that could put people in jeopardy from a rack safety standpoint. And then there's a third-party expertise element. I don't think you want never to, but I think we highly advise that you don't go about this rack safety program on your own. As much institutional knowledge as you think you might have within your organization, there's always somebody out there, I think, that will have learned a bit more and taking things in a slightly different direction. And that's what we try to do from a third-party expertise. Lean on the experts that are out there. Yes, you'll have to pay a little bit to have that expertise, but it'll fill the gaps in your program and ensure that you're looking after things the right way. Then we start building out the wheel with the various pillars of the wheel. We start off with an inspection. Now you're going to see we come at this from starting off with inspection, and then we flow through the wheel. You may already have a great inspection program in place, and you may start in the wheel at a different stage. But for the purposes of today's presentation, we'll talk about inspection kind of being in a lead position. Then we have an element of insight. So whatever information that we conclude from our inspection, we're going to have in the insight phase so that we know what to tackle. The maintenance is now executing and acting on those critical issues that we identified in the insight phase. And then we have a prevention. So you're not always going to have to fix things right away as part of the insight or inspection phases, or even in the maintenance phase. You may be able to leverage the information from insight to prevent damage or further damage from happening to your uprights, depending on where they're located. And then we complete the wheel with kind of a little bit more detail in each phase of the wheel. So that's what we've put together from a rack safety flywheel standpoint. So we're going to start off with the inspection, the first, I would say, module in our flywheel. So rack damage, and we've shown examples of that already in the beginning of the presentation. So is a collapse imminent, or is the damage not an immediate concern? And how do you know that, right? How do you know if the 1/4 inch deformation on the front of your upright is something that is critical or not? Well, you have to have an expert come in and be able to tell you, or be trained to do so in most circumstances. So here are a couple examples of rack collapses. This is one where you can see that it happened at the far end of the warehouse, and it makes its way violently through the warehouse. So things are not necessarily isolated. Here's a minor impact. So a very gentle tap on the upright is enough to make this structure compromise and then topple. So many of these situations or videos that we're showing were because of repeated impact. So as you can see, this person was not hauling, full tail into the upright. There was a slight turn, a slight tap, and it was enough to cause, what we see here now. This is one that's kind of made the rounds on the news and YouTube. We're not helping things by giving this person a tight fit. Gentle tap of the upright, and it's enough to cause all of these things to topple. And as you can see, the product from the aisle where the damage initially happened pushed all that material into the other aisle. And because these things are designed in a certain way that they're interconnected, because the only way you can add stability to a racking system is by interconnecting the various components, whether it's at the top for one aisle or otherwise, and these all tend to drag everything along with it. And the last video is one where we have a seismic event. In this case, the racking was not designed to meet the seismic code that was required. So as it went through a slight seismic event, it was enough to cause the structure to topple and to fall down. So we want to be mindful of all these kind of things. And I know I just talked about seismic stuff, but that's one of the things that we're focused on at Damotech, to ensure that folks out in the West Coast and that pocket near Tennessee, that you're equipped to do the right thing, that you're mindful of the racking design requirements for uprights and storage within your facilities, because there are different components that have to be designed. There's a different way to approach seismic events and seismic design for warehousing. So OSHA also has a word in all this. We spoke about OSHA in the beginning of the presentation. So across North America, governments require that employees maintain a safe working environment. How I spoke about the why rack safety is important in the flywheel. So not only are we, as employers mindful of that, but OSHA also has a law that says that you're required to look after your employees. So the improper use, selection, and installation or maintenance of racking and storage systems can put workers at risk of injury. And if OSHA has a national emphasis on this, you can rest assured that they're going to be looking at this more closely going forward. So we're going to do a quick poll. I talked about that earlier. I'm going to share the results. So as you can see, 53% of the respondents, so just over half, think that the racking should be done monthly, so that's good. 30% yearly, 13% think it's been done, but a long time ago, and 4% never. So interesting feedback on this. Good to see that folks want to do this monthly, but as you can see, there's a component of respondents that seem to think things differently. Now, I would tell you the answer varies considerably depending on how your, I would say, op tempo is within your facility. So this is our recommendation, along with, I can confidently say most industry experts will fall into the same position. So annual inspections absolutely should be done by third parties. Regardless of the type of situation you're in, whether you're distributing food and beverage, whether you're a big box retailer, whether it's auto parts, having an expert come in with a trained eye to look at your racking is a huge thing. It'll reset the baseline for rack safety within your facility, and they should be identifying a number of things that folks within your own facility will likely not see. Monthly inspections by trained employees. You don't want to have to wait, for the yearly inspection to be able to put eyes on your racking. Putting your own folks to work, your own maintenance techs to work to look at racking on a monthly basis is a very, very, very great idea. Weekly, now you could, in a freezer environment, see that the velocity of your operations dictates that the inspections be done on a more frequent basis. So weekly, again, depending, maybe it's your receiving or shipping areas, but there's a lot of movement. You may want to put eyes on that racking on a weekly basis. And daily, I can't say I see it often, but certainly I think as operators within your facilities, you might be able to say, I know that this section of racking in peak. So when I'm going through my peak season, whether it's before Halloween, before Christmas, before Thanksgiving, I know there are some things that are moving a lot faster than others. So you'll want to put eyes on those particular areas of the warehouse more often than not. When to inspect, we talk about the frequency inspections. Now we want to talk about when. So certainly, if you have incomplete documentation, that's one reason where you don't have all the engineering design and drawings, and I will call them the LARC, the load application and rack configuration drawings. So if you don't have the documentation for your racking, you'll want to have somebody come in to make sure that that's complete. If you've reconfigured or you have a new installation, if you take racking down in a facility, you take all those components and put them back up somewhere else, whether at the facility or elsewhere, and the combination is different, you want to have somebody look at the racking, make sure the capacities are correct and that it's been installed correctly. You may have had an accident. You may have had OSHA come by, all right, in which no one wants to have the no-knock from OSHA, but it happens. And this national emphasis program allows OSHA inspectors the legal right to come in and look at your racking, even if they were just called in for an emergency exit issue. Once they're in your warehouse, they look at that emergency exit issue. They have every right now with the NEP to say, you know what, I'm going to go take a walk around your facility to see if you have load capacity signs posted, if you have damage to your uprights. So OSHA coming in, not a good thing, and you want to be prepared if they do, and take it one step further before they come in. And of course, corporate safety initiatives or performance benchmarking across the facilities is also a reason to have an inspection in place. So independent inspections, what does that really mean? I've talked a lot about it already. So it's a third-party audit. It's what we commonly call, an engineer or someone of a certain expertise coming in and looking at the racking from an independent standpoint. It's a look at the compliance to codes and standards, typically performed by trained engineers, offers a detailed report of the findings so that you fully understand what it is that you're up against and how to take the next steps to address those things. And of course, key findings and recommendations. As the reports float up to upper management, you want to make sure that it's concise and that the takeaways are very clear and that the plan of action can be readily developed. So independent inspections comprise a number of things. So someone's trying to sell you on, hey, I'm going to have somebody look in square foot warehouse, and they're going to be in here a couple hours. They're not selling you the right thing. And these are just examples of things that we look at. So on the uprights, we're going to look at damage. We're going to look at verticality. So are the uprights plumb? We'll look at clearance to certain building infrastructure. You can only be so close to a building column according to the code. Are there row spacers? If the racking is too tall based on its current footprint, is there damage to bracing? And of course, those kind of things. On the beams, some fairly obvious things, but beam deflection. Is there double stacking on the beams? Is it permitted? Have the load drawings or engineering calcs take into account that you're double stacking? Is the double stacking done in a neat way to where the pallet can't topple? Is there an incompatibility of the beams? Are you putting in a 96-inch beam that should be 4 inches tall, but you put in a 3.5 because that's all you had in stock? All those things are issues that should be looked at. So from a safety standpoint, are your pallets in good condition, or are they tied off the right way? Do you have loose material that could fall in the event of a small impact? How's the flow of forklifts within the aisles? Are things too narrow? Those kind of things. And of course, other things that are also important that you want to look at. If you're in a food environment where you're processing meats, is there rust on the uprights? Do you have galvanized components? Have welded repairs been completed? And are those done in the right way? These are all things that you want to be mindful of as you ask an expert to come in and render an opinion on the amount of safety on your racking. So on our website, we have a rack safety checklist. Feel free to download it. We kind of, we're very much of the mindset of kind of keep it simple, stupid. There's no need to have a checklist, at least for those that are starting off in this process. That's too complicated. So things like looking at upright columns and braces and beams, looking at the anchoring, are the beam connectors in, or is there anything missing? Do you have safety pins that are potentially missing? Those are the kind of things we want to look at, we want to observe. And as I mentioned before, you can download this. And of course, there's other means of inspecting. If you think you're at a point now where you're beyond just the basic inspection and you want to go into something a bit more high tech, where you're now sharing information with others, but there's also an app that we have to help you inspect that's available, and we could discuss at a later time. So here's just a zoomed in version of what to look at. It is always a location information, the various components, which I spoke about already, and of course, the priority that goes with it. And we'll talk about priorities here in a little bit. So inspection history, I think that's a great kind of best practice. You'll want to keep all your inspection records on hand in the event, again, that OSHA inspector were to, come into your facility and say hello. And I've been told, because we train OSHA inspectors on this kind of stuff, we had a call with them and we asked them what kind of things that they look for. And they said, hey, Mark, if I walk into a facility and I start looking at their racking, because I'm allowed to do so now, if I see that they've got a binder full of past inspections, they have a program that's in place and that it's thorough and it's well thought through, says that I'm a happy camper. I'm not going to spend hours looking at something when I know it's in control. So having an inspection history is not only good for the OSHA inspector, but just for yourselves as well, to make sure that you now have a means of going back to see, are we improving? Are we missing potentially some things that maybe we should be looking at? Now, the insight, and this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. So we have this inspection process that we've spent either money on or that we have trained our folks to perform. Now we want to see what information can we glean from all that stuff. So in the insight component, you'll want to have the inspection report findings. So this is something that's very succinct. It could have a tremendous amount of detail, or it could have an executive summary like what we do to ensure that the important things are put up front in the report. You'll have a stamp report. You'll have the engineer kind of putting his seal or her seal of approval on the report to ensure that it's in keeping with codes. Sometimes you'll have an Excel file or other, media to share the images that were taken. So, I mean, we all kind of say it, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and this is, a perfect example of that statement. Me telling you that I found 100 high priority issues doesn't do a whole lot if I can't show the evidence behind it. If I can't say, hey, look, 10 feet up in the air, you've got two braces that are considerably bent, that are now compromising the rest of your upright. So these are things that I think they're important to have out. We also believe in having a layout. So we develop a layout as part of our inspection process. So you can, very accurately see, are there some aisles that have a lot of red in them? In other words, a lot of high priority issues. And is it because there's an operational issue that we just happen to hire some temps during peak, and that's where those folks are predominantly working? Who knows? That layout helps drive those conclusions. A summary of recommendations, which I alluded to already, and of course, load capacity. Now, we talk a lot about inspection. I want to ensure that everybody understands that a subnote to the inspection process is the load capacity need. If your uprights don't have the engineering documentation that goes with them, if you've made modifications to your uprights over time, that engineering documentation needs to be updated and filed so that folks know how much each beam level can hold, and that when somebody comes by to take a look at things, they know as well. So we talk about inspection a lot in this presentation, but as a subcomponent of this, there's a load capacity element that we can't forget as well. Here's an example of what a report could look like. So we have key findings, we have inspection highlights, we have a pie chart and other charts that kind of give us an impression of what components are kind of driving the train from an issue standpoint. Is it my diagonal braces because folks are side shifting their pallets as they go into position? Is it my upright columns, which often is the case I get run into with the forklifts, outriggers? All of these things you want to have on hand as part of the report so you can make intelligent decisions as you put a plan forward. I talked about prioritizing the issues. There's no point in having a report that just gives you, a mouthful of issues. So here's 100 issues. Hey, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, just go figure it out. So you want to have that third party prioritize the things that you want to spend your money and time on. So we approach it in 4 different buckets. From the left, we have the unload. So that's like, think about those pictures that I showed at the beginning of the presentation where the upright is no longer making contact with the slab, where there's a pallet and a drive-in that's about to fall because of the deformation on the upright. Those are your inspector should be calling you, going to their point of contact and saying, unload this position right away and put it out of service because there's an imminent risk of a collapse. Then we kind of move to the right to the high priority category. So this is when you want to address ASAP. May not necessarily need to unload, maybe the top level if needed, but your inspector will be able to guide you whether an unload of that position is required or not, partially, I mean. These are things we want to address ASAP. We want to tackle the unloads by making sure that that bay is put out of service. And we want to tackle the high priority issues by putting a fix in place ASAP. Now, the other 2 buckets, one, the moderate is, hey, we saw it. It doesn't rise to the level where it needs to be unloaded or addressed right away. But if you're going to have somebody mobilized to perform some upright replacements or some repairs, you may want to add some of those moderate issues to the scope of work, because it's just a matter of time before those locations get re-impacted. and you're going to have to address them at some point as well. The low, this is what engineers do to ensure that it was noted. As minor as the issue is, small deformation, there's wire mesh decking that may be slightly bent, that kind of stuff falls into the low. And it's more to say, hey, we saw it, we made note of it, keep your eye on it, but there's no need to act right away. And here's kind of neat to know, bit of information. So in a 100,000 square foot food and beverage warehouse, typically, and this is based on our own data, having collected or inspected several million square feet of warehousing every year, roughly 10% of the issues that we find will typically be of high priority or greater. So if you've got 2,000 bays, 2,000 uprights in your facility, no one has come by in some time to take a look at it, you can rest assured that north of 10% of your uprights will likely have a high priority or more damage that has to be addressed. And these aren't things that we're making up. These are stats that we take from our own inspections. We plug them into our business intelligence database, and it cranks out all this information for us. So more of a, hey, heads up, if you haven't had anybody come in, this is what you could expect. Now on the maintenance, now we're executing on the issues that we found as part of the insight phase. So we want to address a plan to fix things ASAP. So if I haven't made myself clear enough yet about unloads and high priorities, this is where we're even focusing more on things. And examples of those high priority and unload issues are on the screen now. You want to repair or replace those components quickly. One, just to ensure that you're back in operation, but also to ensure that the people that are working in and around the uprights are well protected. And factors to consider as you opt to repair or replace something: manufacturing cycle time, and of course, impact to operations. Component replacement, we will always say, now I know we're into the rack repair business, but if I put my independent engineer hat on and you have damage to an upright, we're all about it. You want to swap out that upright and put a new component in, go off and do it. You've got some spare uprights in the back that are of the exact same dimensions and specs as what has been damaged and reported in the inspection report. Absolutely go swap that component out. But you have to ensure, and I can't reemphasize this enough, the specs and dimensions of those replaced components must be exactly what you had there before. Otherwise, they're just not going to behave the same way. They're not going to have the same load capacity as what was there before. So we want to be mindful of that if we decide to replace components. Now, rack repair, if you decide to go down that road, and I think you'll see here in a slide or two the benefits of considering rack repair for the issues on your racking, specifically on the uprights and the bracing. So you want to ensure that it's an engineered solution. Someone with an engineering degree is standing behind the design of that repair solution and can document all of those things in a way that makes you feel comfortable that it meets code. And it has to restore load capacity. The last thing you want to do is to put a repair in place and then get a haircut on load capacity because the component is not sufficient to do the work. You want to maintain the original configuration. So as you can see, whether it's a Z pattern for your bracing or it's a star-shaped pattern, whatever the pattern of bracing, you want to ensure that you're replicating that with the repair that you put in place. Now, bolted solutions, as we have, I will tell you, just not because we're in the industry, but because there's so fewer variables to worry about when you're bolting a solution in place as opposed to field welding. There's nothing in the code that says you can't weld when you perform a repair, but there's so many things. I mean, you talk about pulling yourself through a keyhole when you're welding in the field. I mean, you have to have a certified welder. You have to make sure the area is prepped accordingly. You have to make sure an engineer looks to see if the weld penetrated the damaged component sufficiently. Because if you do have somebody come by to inspect, OSHA or otherwise, they're going to want to see that documentation. So as field welding, is done in the industry, because we all know we have maintenance folks that have that certification, think twice about doing that, because there are so many things that could go wrong. And finally, you want to minimize impact on operations, and rack repair helps you do that. So as you kind of sit there listening to what I'm proposing, think to yourself, what is more expensive in your experience, replacing an upright or repairing the damaged upright? So we're going to go through a brief comparison. So an upright replacement and a permanent repair, like we do here at Damotech. So, and I would say typically, unless you've got some stock of uprights in your facility, a replaced upright will take considerably longer to manufacture and ship than a rack repair solution. The downtime. The downtime, if you've got a 30-foot tall upright with 5 beam levels, think of all the time that you're spending removing the freight from those beam levels, removing the beams, both sides of the upright, by the way, and then coming in to swap out the upright and doing this whole thing in reverse as you put the beams back in the freight back. With the right kind of rack repair, you can avoid a lot of that downtime because of the patented process that we have that requires minimal unloading of the location depending on the height of the damage. Installation, I kind of alluded to it a little bit, from an unloading standpoint, but just the hours that it takes to swap out an upright. Anybody who's been through it, you're going to look at 2, 3, 4, 5 hours to swap out an upright, depending on its complexity and also on the experience of the workers that are doing it versus rack repair. And I would tell you a 24-inch kit, which is by far the most common kit that we'll sell, can be installed in under 30 minutes. So think about, as you're an operational manager or you're looking at, efficiency in your warehouse, do you want to spend the hours of downtime to replace an upright, or would you prefer potentially the minutes that it takes to get that bay back into operation? Lastly, we have the repeated damage. So anybody can tell you that once you swap out an upright, and I mentioned before how more and more uprights are made of thinner gauge with a slightly different design to make them less expensive, which means that they're more prone to impact or damage rather, if and when somebody impacts them. So it's just a matter of time. It's not if that upright is going to be re-impacted, it's a matter of when. So you put a new upright in place, it's a matter of months or a couple years before an operator comes back in and damages that same upright that you replaced. Now, versus the permanent repair, which has a built-in protection. So the orange kit that you see there is the Pro line of our repairs, and it comes with a lifetime impact warranty. So finally, and ta-da, what's the magic answer to the question that I had posed before? What's more expensive? And I will let each one of you kind of do the mental math. But as I look at things on the left side of the column of the page and the right side, certainly the aspect of time, operational inefficiency, and recurrence of damage makes the left side of the page more expensive, and in some cases considerably more expensive than having to do that repair just once throughout the lifetime of a location. So I'll let that kind of simmer as you kind of mull over your own set of your own context. Now, in a prevention, so think back to my inspection. I had an inspector come in, a professional that came in to tell me what's wrong with my racking setup. I have insight that told me a bunch of great things that I'm going to act on as part of my maintenance plan. But all those low priority issues that I spoke about, maybe you only had a small deformation. Maybe you had damage on a bunch of the end of aisles, but not so much on some other ones. Well, if you are replacing some components, put some protection in there, right? Make sure that you protect those areas that are most prone to damage, and that you're mindful of the things that could lead to damage down the road. So we want to be proactive spend a bit more money in our CapEx or in our budget to prevent that damage from happening in the first place. And the things and the kind of four buckets we want to protect, so that we're not always talking about damage, but there's people, infrastructure, assets, and inventory. So protecting people, the code is very clear. If you've got pedestrians that are navigating close to forklift traffic, you have to make sure that you protect those pedestrians with fencing or other forms of protection devices. Wire mesh decking, not required everywhere, but if you have a tunnel, you're required to put wire mesh decking to prevent loose product from falling and potentially hurting somebody. And of course, netting on the far right there. If you've got pedestrian traffic on the back side of a single row of uprights where product, when pushed from the other side, can fall, or if a pallet is pushed too far, or if product is loose and it's not well secured, you want to make sure you have netting in those areas to prevent people from being hurt. Protecting infrastructure. So nowhere in here do you see the image of a rack, but within a warehouse, you will have building columns, and you will, if you're in a manufacturing environment, you're going to have very expensive high-tech machinery that you want to protect. So if you think that it's cumbersome and expensive to have to fix racking, I pray that you don't go through the pain of a damaged structural column, because a building column is designed a certain way to support the entire building. Once you start putting a forklift through a building column, and you can start seeing daylight, or you start seeing cracks in the concrete, that bad days are ahead. So spend the money, protect those areas which are most prone to impact, and you won't have to face that kind of hurt down the road. Other assets you want to protect, I've talked about it already, and kind of makes sense. Protecting your uprights. If you're going to spend $1 million on outfitting your warehouse with brand spanking new uprights, should we not also be mindful of protecting that asset, so that, one, we're protecting our investment, and two, the operational downtime of having to replace or repair components down the road. So rack safety is an ongoing process. As I make my way through the last little bit here of the flywheel in-house knowledge, we want to make sure that we train our folks. So I'm going to do a second and last poll. So I would ask you to participate as much as you can. When was the last time your employees were trained on rack safety and how to recognize the issues? And those are the potential answers there. So thank you. We're going to share the results. 38% of you, good, are saying that your folks were trained this past year. 11% a couple years ago. 20%, 1/5 of you, I'm not sure, it was such a long time ago. And almost a third of the respondents are saying that your folks have never been trained on recognizing issues for rack safety. Take a look at that and be mindful of what those results show. We're going to keep on going here. So now that you've kind of seen the poll results, almost a third of respondents are saying that their folks had never been trained. Well, or they've been trained, very, very long time ago. So hopefully this will kind of ring true, and you'll see the benefit of doing this. Benefits of safety education. What's the first thing? Well, first and foremost, we're going to reduce injuries. So that's an important part of things. We'll want to reduce maintenance costs. If you train folks on, one, be careful about impacting stuff, but also how to react to it, I think you're over time, you're going to be more cognizant of what it takes to reduce those maintenance costs. Reduce liability. Obviously, there are insurers out there, insurance companies that have a keen and watchful eye on what's going on from a rack safety standpoint. They've come to us for advice, so we counsel insurance companies on what to look for. So you want to be mindful of that. Of course, you want to extend the life of the racks. You want to make that investment last as long as possible. Increase productivity. And of course, by empowering others, you're training key folks on site on how to identify issues on a periodic basis. So employee training, being told to be safe is simply not enough. You can hammer it home as much as you want, but if it was easy to do, we wouldn't be having these webinars. So better behavior comes from a few things. Awareness of the regulations. You have to let them know that there are regulations in place out there that you're expected to follow. Ability to recognize a risk. If you don't tell somebody or show somebody what to look for, how are they supposed to know? Right? Understanding the consequences. Remember those images that I spoke about before about a collapse? Those are all kind of the far end of the spectrum, but in between that, there's a variety of things that can happen with the racking when it's damaged that you want to avoid. And of course, empowering workers. I think folks will step up to the plate when needed, when they have been taught and educated about the right things to look out for. Culture impacts safety, and it goes without saying that if you want to move the needle in a significant fashion at your facility from a rack safety standpoint, it starts and stops with having a culture of safety within the premises. So I'm hoping you can hear this. This is an example of why we work safe. It's a video that we developed, but it's meant to say and drive home the idea that your workers work hard. They work for you, but they also want to go home and see their loved ones. So put safety first always, because at the end of the day, that's what's supposed to drive, our behavior day in and day out. Employee training. Don't think that the VP of ops that you have is gets a buy on trying to understand rack safety. I think working from the top down is the way to go, and it ensures that people have skin in the game and they understand that damaged racking requires a fix. It may cost money, but there's also a reason behind it. So senior management to managers on the mid-level, safety, operations, and maintenance all have to be part of all this. And of course, forklift operators, those that are the ones oftentimes causing the damage, have to be mindful of what their actions can lead to. Third-party expertise, and I think I've alluded a lot throughout the presentation about having experts, in your back pocket to help answer questions. And that third-party expert that you're leaning on for help should help you track and report all the things that are going on with your facility. So to have a platform available where there's clear communication through the chain of command, where you're able to drive accountability and monitor progress, kind of makes sense, right? If you have a bunch of disparate ways of inspecting and collecting data, you'll never be able to aggregate all of those great conclusions in a way that can really drive behavior in the right direction. So we developed a rack safety platform. So it's a web-based software to help you manage the rack safety within your facilities. I encourage you to try our demo. The link is there on the website. But fundamentally, it's a way to inspect, a platform to help you inspect your racking, to collect the data, take the pictures, monitor the issues, to make sure that the things that need to be fixed are getting fixed, so that you can track the progress of those things that can really get you in the hurt box down the road. And of course, you could also store training records. Tracking of inspection issues, I think, is key. There's no point in going through an inspection exercise in January and then come June not know where things stand. Have things been addressed? Have they not been? Have I put the order in for replacing components? Do I still have as much red as I had when I first inspected? All of those things have to be tracked, because you don't know what progress you'll be making if you don't have a way to track those issues. So we've gone through a number of great things today. I'm hoping a lot of this kind of rings true. The flywheel is up on the screen, and I think as we made our way through it, the what are we trying to solve for and improve on? Why are we trying to solve this important initiative? Who should we be leaning on as much of in-house and third party? And of course, the other building blocks of the flywheel that make up a sophisticated training and rack safety program. So this is who we are. We're here to help. We didn't put this webinar on without being mindful of what we can do to help our various partners out there. We have integrated solutions, and we're the largest provider of those rack safety solutions across North America. Engineering expertise, we have it in spades with our almost 40 engineers in-house. So from an inspection or load capacity calculation standpoint, you can turn to us to help bridge the gaps that you may have. Safety products, as much on the repair side as the protection side, we have solutions that can get you back up and running in a safe and efficient fashion. And of course, the platform, which I just spoke about, is a great tool and a great way to improve and monitor the rack safety progress that you're going to be instituting. There's some additional tools, so certainly some resources that you can download, posters, handouts, a variety of things that can help you, again, make that journey of rack safety throughout the weeks and months to come. So damotech.com /resources is where you can get those components. And of course, we're a few minutes shy of the end, but there may be some questions out there which I'll look at right now. One of the questions that we have is, is load capacity a requirement for OSHA? Absolutely. OSHA will turn to the building code. The building code says you must have load capacities posted so that folks can see them, and they must be accurate. So the answer is absolutely yes, because OSHA will just refer to the regulation that requires that. So that's an easy one for them to look for. When they walk through, beyond just, hey, I saw some damage, if they don't see load capacity placards or labels on the beams indicating the capacity of those upright systems, they will note that and have you take care of that. How do I know if I have to repair or replace an upright? Well, it comes with training. Certainly having an engineer inspector come in initially will help you get a baseline. You'll learn from that, but also going through some training, which we offer, by the way, on how to identify rack issues, I think is the right way to go. Is there a method to determine the rack capacity without the service of a specialized person? And the answer is no. The tables that you have online that an OEM might post are just very basic. They don't take anything. They don't take seismic into consideration. They don't take the level of beams into consideration. You have to turn to a professional engineer to run the calcs to be able to have that capacity. Last question here. How do I know where to start in the flywheel? Great question. I think it's just kind of situation dependent. We mentioned starting the flywheel at the very top with the inspection component, and then making your way through the insight, the maintenance, and the prevention. But as I mentioned before, maybe you have, and some of the respondents have said that they've trained their folks in the last year and that they inspect every month. Maybe you already have a sophisticated program, but are you getting the other building blocks of the flywheel as part of that effort? Are you getting actionable insight? Are you putting a maintenance program in place? So you may be able to start a little bit later in the wheel. So I think that's less important as much as putting emphasis on parts of the flywheel, investing dollars and time and resources to get that momentum going, get the flywheel turning in the direction that it's supposed to, so that you can start making some improvements to what you have. There's one here. Can you touch base on any inspection or certifications required by the USA by a third party or their frequency? Now, there's the certification we spoke about. So we spoke about load capacity certifications. From an inspection standpoint, there really isn't anything out there that says what the frequency needs to be. I think OSHA looks at it from a very, very global standpoint based on the activity at your warehouse. So I think it's situational dependent again. And if you refer back to the slide where we talk about frequency of inspections, that'll helpfully guide you on. If that answer is insufficient, I would certainly ask that you reach back out to us. Feel free to book a call with one of our experts. Go out to damotech.com and fill out a form. We'll get right back at you with what to do next, whether it's scheduling an inspection, having a phone call, or sending some information your way for you to better understand the building